Welcome to my talk. With great community comes great responsibility. Fully intended pun for the title there. I'm Imran. I'm a community designer for the gov.uk design system. You may recognize a version of that title comes from a saying. With great power comes great responsibility. And this has been brought into public consciousness through Spider-Man. Hence the Spider-Man background by Uncle Ben. But it also can be attributed to Voltaire, who's a classic Enlightenment period scholar from France. And it was this kind of quote that led up to some of the kind of political feeling that led up to the French Revolution. So it's quite an important saying, and it comes from some great kind of literature and theology. And we're going to speak a little bit about theology. It's just a quick talk, so we won't get too deep into theology and ethics, but I'll share what we can kind of learn from them. So I'm Imran. I'm a community designer. I work in kind of government. There's not a lot of community in government, so my role's kind of fashioned in a special way. So what I kind of do is design the interactions between my team and the users of the product that we build. I think Jen did mention she called it a systems design, but it's a design system. So it's like the building blocks of services that different departments use when, if you go online and you're trying to renew your driving license or something like that. That's what government kind of delivers. And my team creates like the building blocks to help different departments create these services. So we are going to be talking about community, and I think it's important to kind of address what is a community because it means different things to everyone. But we'll also talk about, are ethics really important, especially if you're building community? Yeah, as long as you're kind of kind, will you kind of get by? And then finally, we'll look at what community ethics can kind of look like and what we can learn from the different schools of ethics and apply those to our communities. So, community can be anything, but generally it is a collection of people kind of being brought together. It could be people brought together in locale, a community of locality. It could be people brought together through their work, so a community of practice. It could be an environmental group, so like a community of action. But the commonality there is the relationships kind of between people. And it's that kind of values and joint identity that really add value to a kind of community. I'm going to read a quote here. In the 1980s, there's a chap called Anthony Cohen, and I think he was the first one that really pushed the idea of communities as a place of belonging rather than just the structure that brings people together. And the quote is, "People construct community symbolically, making it a resource and repository of meaning and referent of their kind of identity." So it's a bit of a mouthful, but it can really create a sense of belonging. As kind of Luca mentioned in the last talk, actually, that sense of belonging can be really, really powerful. It can help you feel motivated. It can help you to kind of take action. And that's where the value in kind of community kind of belongs. Now, that can be applied to any type of structure, whether it's a club, a society, a workplace community. And for the ethics that we're talking about in this talk, you can really apply them to any of those kind of structures, as long as you create the right environment where there is that sense of belonging. Personally, I see community as a set of relationships. So it's the people that are the absolute key kind of thing, and managing those relationships. That's what a community professional kind of does. It's why you'll see when people talk about community, there's loads of great phrases that people tend to use, and it's always living things, right? Because a set of relationships, it's organic, it's something real, it's living. You can't always control it. You might be able to influence it. So you might hear people talking about communities as gardens, and a community manager is gardening. So you're tending the soil and creating the right condition for the community or the plant to kind of thrive. an analogy I like to use is thinking of a community as a baby. All right. So, a child, raising a child is like complex and difficult. And this is a great one if you're trying to get support at work, because yes, you can raise a child till they're 4 or 5 years old, right? They know they have to eat, they know they have to go to the toilet, but you wouldn't take a 5-year-old and just leave them in the jungle or leave them on the side of the road, right? You wouldn't suddenly stop supporting them. And it's the same with a community. The more you look after it, the more you kind of guide it and shape it, the more it will kind of thrive. So this kind of organic relationships are a key part of community. We're quite lucky that we're part of many of these communities, and we're here today as part of the led by community community of community professionals. So, bringing it round to ethics, are ethics really that kind of important? Ethical practice can make or break a company. And I'm just going to share an image with you. I'm not going to say anything for a second. I'm going to see if it has the impact that I think it's going to. I see a few rolling eyes. Right, I see a few rolling eyes. So in case you've been living under a rock, this is Elon Musk. He's fallen out with Donald Trump at the moment. But he has been courting the far right. And has it had an impact on his companies? Despite his hands facing that way, I can tell you the stock prices have definitely gone that way after he started to act like this. And that's because Elon's representative of these kind of organizations. He's very public facing, like communities are. And the same way, if communities aren't seen as looking after their users, you're going to get negative PR. People are going to change their perception of your organization, and it will affect how people think about you, and could affect the bottom line at the end of the day as well. So you might also have felt exploited in a workplace or a company. This is quite a famous image of Amazon's warehouse workers. So they're known for kind of like union busting and overworking their workers, not giving them breaks and things like that. But it's not just tech giants. The same thing can apply to any sort of small company as well. And the same could apply to social communities. So Facebook, another kind of tech giant, it has 2.1 billion active users every single day and collects 500 terabytes of data every single day. And it sells a lot of that data. And in certain countries, such as this one, there was a big scandal around the general election, and it was shown to affect the outcome of the election in this particular country. So ethical practice with social communities or with workplace communities can have a massive, massive impact. And it's not just tech giants, right? It's smaller communities as well. And it might be smaller communities or smaller workplaces where you often get exploited a little bit more because your guard is a little bit lower. You don't expect them to behave in such a way. So just do keep an eye out. So what does community ethics kind of look like? And what can we learn from ethical practice that is out there? So we're going to borrow from a few of the popular school of ethical thought. So there's utilitarianism, deontological ethics, and virtue ethics. So this consequentialism, also known as utilitarianism, but we'll go through them one by one. So consequentialism or utilitarianism, bit of a mouthful, but generally it just kind of means what's really, really important is the result for the community member or the user. The result is the absolute key thing. A lot of this derived from like John Stuart Mill. He created this harm principle. So whatever you do should do no harm. And that's a pretty easy one to kind of follow. There was also Jeremy Bentham, who created ACT utilitarianism, but it's generally the same concept. You should do no harm. So how does that apply to our communities? So one way is to not mislead your users to create deceptive outputs. So there's something in user-centered design called deceptive patterns. So it's where you kind of trick the user through guilt or words or where they can click to make them kind of do what you want them to kind of do. And it is essentially misleading your users, as you can kind of tell from this image. Opt in, don't opt out, don't not opt in, and then a really grayed out opt out all, right? So a lot of people see these as, oh, it's a nifty little trick, I'll be able to convert it into a sale, but it's massively unethical and it brings down people's estimation of your kind of company. And you might see this with communities where it's things like, oh, we'll give you a free trial period, and then suddenly it just kind of stops, or access to certain aspects of the community, but then there's a sudden paywall before you hit other aspects that that person wants to kind of access. There's a balance here because community work takes a lot of work and a lot of time. So you should be rewarded for the kind of work that you kind of put in. But if you want to be ethical, you need to be really upfront and straightforward about it and not mislead your users into thinking they're going to get something when they don't. So there's a balance to be had, absolutely. Just make sure you tread kind of lightly when you're kind of doing that. Another one is to think about users' needs. So you always have aligning with your organization. There's always a tech stack, things you can do with your platform, things you can't do with your platform. But things should generally be focused on what your users or your community members kind of need from your kind of community. It's always good, like I said, to hit the sweet spot where, you know, in the Venn diagram, they all kind of align in the middle. But if you're just focusing on what you can get out of your community, how you can, you know, use them to the maximum and get the fullest out of the people that are part of your community, they will feel exploited by you. And they will notice, and it will start to affect your reputation as a community. So please be careful about that. Another thing is to allocate adequate resources for your community, because it's all good setting it up in a lovely way, having it kind of ready to go, going to the community and asking them exactly what they kind of want. But if you don't have the funds, the platforms, the time, the ability to be able to deliver on that, then you're setting your community up for failure. So make sure the right conditions, the right funding, whether it's, you know, the adequate time from yourselves or your community members. If you need funding to access certain platforms or you need to run events, you're going to need a bit of funding, or even just energy, because you need to be able to commit certain amounts of energy to making certain projects happen. So allocate adequate resources to be able to deliver on your promises. Otherwise, you will be seen as unreliable. And again, it could affect how your community kind of see you. Moving on to the next school of ethics, which is deontological ethics. And a key figure in this was Immanuel Kant. And basically, it's all about acting with goodwill. And goodwill means acting for the sake of duty, and you have a duty to follow moral law. So it's about ethics in the sense of duty, deontological ethics. So how does deontological ethics apply to community? So one aspect could be accountability. Okay, so you might have a community manager or a community person, but what power does the community have in that kind of context? How can they hold, if something's going wrong, how can they hold them to account? Is there a code of conduct? Is there a way to report complaints? And what happens when you report a complaint? Is it that person's colleague suddenly assessing them, someone marking their own homework, and nothing's going to actually happen? So think about your processes from your community perspective as well. Is there a way of recourse if someone's acting immorally? And also, you know, it could be things such as someone runs a community and they're using it as a way to just raise their personal profile and put themselves front and center and wasting everyone's time, how can you hold that person to kind of account? So having those clear, open processes just makes it a lot more clear ethically and means you're delivering on your users' needs. And closely tied to that is kind of power relations. So I can't count the amount of times I've kind of helped and worked with communities where it's one person kind of leading it. And when it comes down to it, it can affect which direction the community is moving in. So if it's just one person who quite often is a senior leader, they have certain things that they're trying to achieve within that community. And what they're trying to do is push their agenda, and it's not centered on the users at all. So think about how power flows, think about how you can involve people in decision-making processes. And that not only will help you ethically, but it also kind of creates that sense of ownership of the community as well. And it'll make people a lot more interested and active within your community rather than just passengers that are waiting to turn up and see what kind of happens. Another one on deontological ethics, think about privacy and confidentiality. So you may be collecting data, there's a right to kind of privacy and confidentiality, and that might be data that you collect, for membership, but it might also be feedback loops. So if you're asking for feedback on how the community is kind of run, you don't want to single anyone out. There should be confidential ways to kind of feed things back. I'm just going to speed run through the next part because we're running a bit short on time. So the last school of ethics is virtue ethics, and this came about by Aristotle a lot of the time. And it's, instead of defining a person as someone who does good actions, Aristotle would define good actions as done by good people. And it's acting upon a set of virtues that makes you a good person. So that's what virtue ethics is about. So there will be different virtues for every single community. The context that you're working in, the environment, the company, the people involved is going to be different. So values will be completely different. I think one that is pretty universal is kind of transparency. So what are you working towards? How much funding does your community have? How long are you going to be able to support it? And this is one of the examples. I've seen countless communities where people just suddenly stop supporting them. They've got funding for 6 months. After 6 months, it's not quite doing what I want. Suddenly it's going to fall off the edge of the cliff. But if you're transparent about what you've got funding for and what you need to keep continuing and what the community needs to do, I think that's absolutely fine. But if you're just trying to get what you can out of people for 6 months and then you suddenly stop it even though there's people interested, that's much less kind of ethical. An approach, and this kind of aligns with Luca's talk from before, definitely demonstrate and promote certain values and behaviors that you feel should be prevalent in the community. So there's two kind of strands to this. So first of all, if you've got certain values, your leadership of the community and different members of the community need to be demonstrating it. But there's a second strand, which is you also need to create an environment where your community members can demonstrate it too. So that might be creating that sense of psychological safety. It might be creating opportunities where people can show these kind of values. So you need to create an environment where it's easy for people to act in a certain kind of way, where there's opportunities for them to demonstrate leadership or demonstrate kindness, whether it's a mentoring circle in your community or if there's some kind of pastoral care within your community or something like that. So demonstrate them yourself as leadership, but also create an environment where it's easy for people to demonstrate them as well. And the final thing is kind of encourage growth. Okay, so allow the community to kind of encourage growth, and that might be through mentorship, as I just said, creating learning sessions where people can kind of learn from each other. But also, if someone makes a mistake or says something wrong, or there's a bit of conflict within a community. Quite often it comes down to code of conduct and telling the person off. Each one of those is a learning opportunity, and that's an opportunity to see someone grow, explain to them, get them to reflect on what they have done and why you think it didn't align with the community. And that's an opportunity to see that person become a better person, and that's part of your kind of community environment. So I'm starting to build an ethical framework, and I've kind of changed the names to make them a little bit more plain English. So instead of utilitarianism, it's consequences. Instead of deontological, it's rules and duty, and values is simple enough. But these are some of the things you can do from the different ethical schools of thoughts to kind of make your community more ethical and create a better environment for your organization. So takeaways: set out to provide value for your community, not just for yourself or your organization. Be really transparent about your goals and how you plan to work with the community to achieve them. Don't exploit your position, obviously, and transfer power as often as you can, especially decision-making processes, and think about accountability. There should be ways to hold leads accountable, and apart from a code of conduct, like who's assessing that kind of situation? It shouldn't just be the friends of the leads group. And if there's anything I missed, please kind of come and speak to me and get in touch. If there's some ethical guidelines you use in your community, as I said, I'm starting to develop a framework. So please do come and speak to me and I'll add to it. So thank you very much for your time. And yeah, I'll see you soon.